Hello, it's Erica, and today I'll be talking about the Meiji Restoration. But before we get into all the revolution, let's talk about what went on before all of this. For thousands of years, Japan had one leader, the emperor. And his power had been receding as the shogun, the military forces in Japan, became more and more of the real power in the first millennium. Because they had all the samurai. Yeah, I wouldn't want to fight against that either. Japan at the time was yet centralized, so local daimyo, who are more like outlaw sheriffs, were really the ones enforcing laws in their community. Of course, the daimyo didn't appreciate when the shogun started to come into their cities and enforcing their own laws, so with swords, one thing led to another, and they started to fight. This sparked civil wars in every single inch of the country and led to a whopping 148 years of conflict. These wars got even more intense when foreigners started knocking on Japan's door with new things like guns and religion. Japan had gotten their first glimpse of the Western worlds, but soon after, the war came to an end as Tokugawa Ieyasu won the war in the early 1600s. Now that Tokugawa was in power, they all moved to a city called Edo, now known as modern Tokyo. The emperor was now fully a figurehead with absolutely no power and lived out his days in a beautiful castle. The Tokugawa family ruled in peace for the next 250 years. During this time, they implemented some pretty strict rules, starting with nobody can have swords except samurai, banned all foreign literature, implemented a strict class hierarchy with samurai at the top, following farmers, artisans, and merchants, and finally closed off Japan to foreigners with the rule, step foot on our land and you die. Unless you're the Dutch, because you give us guns, so you can stay. Alright, now it's revolution time. So, as you remember, Japan was chilling in kimonos and tending to rice fields, so long into the 1800s, Japan was stopped in time, looking like Europe did in the medieval era. Until July 8th, 1853, here's where things get a bit more interesting. On this day, Commodore Matthew Perry rolled up to Japan's harbor with his squad of gunships, and made a deal the shogun couldn't resist. This deal would give the states access to Japan's ports, legal immunity to merchants and diplomats, no trade tax, and if Japan made a better deal with any other country, the US would get part of those products as well. Other countries saw the state's success and soon got into the deal. The shogun became more and more powerless. Japan saw the technological advancements of the Western countries and it started to open their eyes about how much they really needed to catch up on. Though now they were trading, so many more people got access to weapons other than the samurai. So, naturally, the daimyo started pointing their guns at the shogun again, but this time it was because of the high tax they had to pay towards Tokugawa, and they could see that their people were suffering with famine and high poverty rates in their communities. Plus, with all these new weapons that they had access to, they were able to stand up to the shogun. In 1868, when the shogun tried to extinguish this rebellion, the Choshu and Satsuma alliances were able to push them all the way back to the capital. This success kindled them to start the restoration of the imperial emperor's rule under the young Meiji, as well as demand the absolute dissolution of the shogun. This was the most change Japan had seen in centuries, but of course it didn't stop there. The shogun army went to war against the pro-imperialist army, but they were no match and got pushed all the way up to Japan's most northern point in Hokkaido. So after 7 centuries of the shogun, the emperor was restored to power, given the name the Meiji Restoration.